The shuttle carrying General Park Ji-hoon exploded 17 days after humanity's acceptance into the Galactic Concorde. A brilliant flash of light against the dark backdrop of Earth's orbital defense network. And the official report called it a catastrophic engine failure. Colonel Baek Yoon-woo did not believe the official report. She stood in the investigation center on Sentinel-7, studying the debris analysis that her team had compiled over the past 3 days. And everything about the evidence felt wrong in ways she could not yet prove. The engine failure theory required a specific sequence of malfunctions that her engineers calculated had a probability of occurring, naturally at approximately 1 in 40 billion. Odds so extreme that coincidence could not reasonably explain them, but when she brought her concerns to the Concorde investigation team, they dismissed her findings as the grief-driven suspicions of a subordinate who could not accept that her commanding officer had died in a simple accident. She accepted their dismissal with quiet courtesy and then continued her investigation. In secret 4 days later, Admiral Chai Mai-rae collapsed at a diplomatic dinner on Convergence Prime, her body convulsing as an unknown toxin attacked her nervous system. And only the quick action of a human medic with emergency antivenoms saved her life. The medic noted something strange as she worked to stabilize the Admiral. The toxin was synthetic, designed with a molecular structure that targeted specifically human biology, which meant that someone had studied human physiology in detail and created a poison meant to kill nothing else. Colonel Baek received this information through unofficial channels and added it to her growing file of suspicious incidents. Commander Yu Min-jae died when his quarters on the colony world New Bizon depressurized during what appeared to be a maintenance error. Captain Seo Haran vanished during a diplomatic mission to the Vethrani homeworld, and her body was never recovered. Lieutenant Colonel En Jun-woo suffered a fatal allergic reaction to medication that he had taken safely for 20 years. The pattern became impossible to ignore. Colonel Baek counted 7 senior military officers dead in 18 days across 3 star systems, each death classified as accident or natural causes, each one removing someone essential to Earth's defense capabilities. She requested an emergency meeting with Ambassador Yoon and presented her findings in the secure conference room of the Human Embassy on Convergence Prime. "Someone is hunting us," Baek said, her voice steady despite the rage that burned beneath her professional exterior. "Systematically eliminating our command structure through methods designed to look accidental." Ambassador Yoon studied the data, her face growing paler with each incident report. "You believe these deaths are connected?" "I believe they are coordinated," Baek replied. "The timing and distribution suggests a professional operation with resources spanning multiple systems and extensive knowledge of human biology and military structure. The Concorde has investigation protocols for exactly this kind of situation," Yoon said, though her tone suggested she already knew what response they would receive. "We should bring this to the Council." "I already tried," Baek admitted. "Through official channels, I requested Concorde assistance in investigating possible coordinated attacks against human personnel. And they suggested that humans might simply be prone to accidents due to our aggressive and reckless nature," Baek said, her jaw tightening at the memory. Several representatives implied that perhaps we should focus on improving our safety protocols, rather than making unfounded accusations. Yoon closed her eyes for a moment, processing the implications. "They are not going to help us." "No," Baek agreed. "Which means we must help ourselves." She pulled up another file, one marked with classification codes that should not have existed according to official records. And Ambassador Yoon recognized immediately what she was seeing. "Task Force Spectre," Yoon whispered. "I thought they were dissolved after the Unification Wars." "Officially they were," Baek confirmed. "Every record shows that Earth Special Operations Assassination program was terminated as part of the peace accords that ended the continental conflicts. But unofficially, 12 operators remain on standby status, scattered across human space under cover identities, waiting for an activation code that we all hoped would never need to be sent. Yoon leaned back in her chair and stared at the ceiling, weighing the decision that had been placed before her. The Galactic Concord explicitly forbade member species from maintaining assassination programs, viewing such capabilities as threats to the stability of interstellar civilization. If humanity activated Spectre and the Concord discovered what they had done, expulsion would be the kindest possible outcome. But if they did nothing, whoever was hunting them would continue killing until Earth's military leadership no longer existed, leaving human worlds defenseless against whatever came next. Do we know who is responsible? Yoon asked finally. Not yet, Beak admitted. But Spectre operators are trained to find answers as well as deliver consequences. What would they need? Authorization from the highest civilian authority available, Beak said. Which, given the current situation, means you. Ambassador. Yoon thought about General Park, who had stood beside her during the demonstration and voiced the same concerns she had felt, and who had died alone in the darkness of space because someone decided that humanity was too dangerous to live. She thought about Admiral Chai, fighting for her life in a medical bay because a poison had been crafted specifically to end human existence. She thought about the 5 other officers whose deaths had been dismissed as coincidence by allies who refused to see what was happening. Send the activation code, Yoon said, her voice carrying the weight of a decision that could not be taken back. And tell them that they have full operational authority to identify and neutralize whoever is responsible. Colonel Beak nodded and left the conference room to transmit the message in the silence that followed. Ambassador Yoon walked to the window and looked out at the stars that humanity had fought so hard to reach. Somewhere out there, enemies were celebrating the success of their campaign against her people. Somewhere out there, 12 men and women would soon receive a transmission calling them back to a duty they had hoped was finished forever. And somewhere out there, the hunters were about to discover that they had chosen prey which did not accept death quietly. The activation signal traveled through secure channels that did not officially exist, reaching a freighter captain in the outer territories, and a cargo handler on a mining station, and a translator working in a Tazayend, and a cargo handler on a mining station, and a cargo handler on a mining station, and a translator working in a Mayonnaise, Morvani Trade Hub, and 9 others scattered across the galaxy. Each one received the same message. Each one understood what it meant. Each one began moving toward the rendezvous coordinates without hesitation, because this was the moment they had trained for, and the oath they had sworn demanded nothing less. Major Kwan Tajan, officially deceased for 11 years, read the activation code on the bridge of his unmarked freighter and felt something cold settle into place behind his eyes. He had spent a decade pretending to be someone else, building a cover identity so complete that sometimes he almost forgot who he really was. But the code reminded him he was a hunter, one of humanity's best, and someone had made the mistake of threatening his people. Navigation, he said to his second in command, a woman who was also officially dead. Set course for the rendezvous point. Understood, Lieutenant Shin Yuna replied, her fingers moving across the controls. Estimated arrival in 4 days. Kwan nodded and turned back to the stars. The enemy had struck first, killing good soldiers through deception and poison and sabotage. Now, Task Force Spectre would respond, and the galaxy would learn why humanity had tried so hard to bury the program that created them. The Galactic Concord chambers had never been so crowded. Representatives from every member species packed into the observation galleries while the Council conducted emergency proceedings that would determine humanity's fate. Ambassador Yun stood at the center of the floor, facing 12 species who held the power to cast Earth back into isolation or accept what humanity had done in its own defense. The evidence broadcast from the Silence Compact Fortress had spread across the galaxy in hours, sparking outrage and fear in equal measure. Some species demanded justice against the HFY officials who had funded the assassination campaign. Others demanded punishment for humanity's violation of Concord law prohibiting member species from maintaining assassination programs. The debate had raged for 3 days, and now it came down to this final session. Humanity deployed illegal operatives into sovereign HFY space, the Morvani representative declared, its insect-like body clicking with agitation. Regardless of provocation, this is a direct violation of Concord Treaty obligations. Humanity defended itself against coordinated genocide, Yu replied, keeping her voice calm despite the anger that burned beneath her professional mask. When we brought evidence of the attacks to this council, we were dismissed and mocked, and told that perhaps humans were simply prone to accidents. The proper response was to continue diplomatic efforts, a Selith representative argued, not to launch military operations that killed hundreds. Diplomatic efforts require partners willing to listen, Yoon countered. And this council demonstrated clearly that human lives were not worth the inconvenience of investigation. She activated a display that showed images of the Spectre operatives who had died during the mission, their faces appearing one by one above the council floor. These soldiers gave their lives to stop a weapon designed to murder billions of innocent people, Yoon continued. And they did so knowing that their own government might be forced to disavow them if their mission became public. They were assassins, the Morvani insisted. Trained killers deployed in violation of galactic law. They were defenders, Yoon shot back. The last line between my people and extinction, because this council refused to be the first. The chambers fell silent as her words echoed through the vast space. Major Quan Taejun stood in the observation gallery with the 4 surviving members of Task Force Spectre, watching the debate that would decide whether their sacrifice had meant anything. They had surrendered themselves to Concord custody upon returning from the Shroud Nebula, accepting that their actions might result in imprisonment or worse. But Ambassador Yoon had insisted that they be present for the proceedings, visible to every species in the gallery as living proof of what humanity had been forced to do. We look terrible, Sergeant Daeho muttered, noting the bandages and healing wounds that marked each surviving operative. Not exactly the image of triumphant heroes. We are not heroes, Quan replied quietly. We are the evidence of what happens when civilized options fail. The debate continued below, species arguing back and forth about law and sovereignty and proportional response. Then a voice rose that surprised everyone in the chamber, the Vethrani representative, whose analyst had first calculated human military capability during the demonstration weeks ago, requested the floor and was granted permission to speak. I have listened to arguments about law and protocol and proper channels, she said, her 4 eyes scanning the chamber with obvious frustration. And I find them hollow in the face of what was revealed by this incident. The compact has operated for 3,000 years, she continued. And in that time they have assassinated political leaders, eliminated inconvenient witnesses, and destabilized entire civilizations at the request of those willing to pay their prices. Every species in this chamber has benefited from looking the other way, pretending that the Silence Compact was merely legend while knowing full well that they were very real. She turned to face the section where HFY officials sat in careful silence. And when humanity arrived, when a species emerged that might finally have the strength to challenge the status quo, certain parties decided that extermination was preferable to competition. Humanity did not start this conflict, she declared. They were targeted for destruction because they were strong, and that strength frightened people. who had grown comfortable with their position in the galactic order. The humans who assaulted that station did not act as conquerors seeking territory or criminals pursuing profit. She continued. They acted as soldiers defending their people against an existential threat, and they did so with remarkable restraint given what they discovered. Restraint. The Morvani representative scoffed. They killed hundreds. They killed combatants in a military installation preparing weapons of mass destruction. The Vithrani corrected. And they captured evidence and prisoners rather than simply destroying the station and everyone in it, which they absolutely could have done. She paused, letting her words settle over the chamber. I move that humanity be cleared of wrongdoing on grounds of justified defense against imminent genocidal attack, she announced, and that the Kethvari officials identified in the evidence be remanded to tribunal for conspiracy to commit species-level murder. The vote that followed was not unanimous, but it was decisive. 9 species voted to accept humanity's actions as justified defense. 3 voted for punishment, including the Kethvari delegation whose members were immediately taken into custody. Humanity remained a member of the Galactic Concord, though subject to enhanced observation for an indefinite period. Task Force Spectre was officially dissolved again. Its surviving members granted immunity for their actions during the crisis. The galaxy had made its judgment, and humanity had survived. Ambassador Yoon met with Major Quan one final time in a private chamber away from the cameras and the politics. You and your team saved billions of lives, she said, and I wish I could give you the recognition you deserve. Recognition would defeat the purpose, Quan replied. We exist in shadows so that others can live in light. What will you do now? Disappear, he said. Rebuild our cover identities and return to waiting for an activation that may never come again. You nodded, understanding the burden that came with being the weapon that no one wanted to acknowledge. Thank you, she said simply, for everything. Quan and his surviving operatives left Convergence Prime on separate vessels, traveling to different corners of human space where they would resume the lives they had abandoned when the activation code arrived. They did not say goodbye to each other. They did not need to. Years passed, and the galaxy slowly absorbed the changes that the compact crisis had created. Humanity established itself as a significant power within the Concord, respected for their strength and feared for what they had proven capable of when pushed. Ambassador Yoon eventually retired, replaced by younger diplomats who had not lived through the days when extinction seemed inevitable, but she remained active in an advisory role, using her experience to guide humanity's integration into galactic society. One day, a young Vethrani diplomatic attaché approached her during a reception on Convergence Prime. Ambassador, the young alien said with obvious curiosity, I have studied the history of the compact crisis, and I have always wondered something. What is that? When humanity discovered what was being done to them, they had the capability to respond with overwhelming force, the attaché said. Your military could have attacked Kethvari space directly, could have demanded vengeance rather than justice. Yes, Yoon agreed. We could have, but you did not, the attaché continued. You sent a small team to accomplish a specific objective and then submitted yourselves to Concord judgment, even though you had every reason to believe that judgment would be unfair. Why did you choose restraint when you had the power to choose otherwise? Yoon smiled, the expression carrying the weight of everything she had learned in the decades since those terrible days. Because strength is not just the capacity for violence, she said. It is the wisdom to know when not to use it. The attaché considered this for a moment. Does humanity still maintain units like the ones that assaulted the compact fortress? Yoon's smile did not waver. She did not answer, and somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, aboard a ship with no registry and no official existence, Major Quan Taejun monitored Concord communications and watched for signs that his people might need him again. He hoped they never would, but if they did, He would answer because that was what it meant to be the strength that others feared, and the shield that kept the ones he loved safe from those who would do them harm. The galaxy had trembled at humanity's strength. The elite killers had struck, and humanity had proven that they were worth saving, not because of their power, but because of what they chose to do with it. The Shroud Nebula swallowed light and hope in equal measure. A vast cloud of dust and radiation that had hidden secrets for millions of years. And somewhere in its depths, the Silence Compact had built their fortress major. Quan Tajin guided the captured compact vessel through the outer sensor nets, using codes extracted from the hunters they had killed to pass checkpoints that should have been impenetrable. 8 operatives remained after the losses of the past weeks. 8 humans preparing to assault a station defended by the most dangerous killers in the galaxy. The odds were not favorable. Quan did not care about odds. Final equipment check, he ordered, his voice steady despite the tension that gripped everyone on the small vessel. We have 12 hours before the bioweapon shipments launch toward human space. Lieutenant Shin Yuna verified her weapons load while Sergeant Odeho ran diagnostics on the explosive charges they would use to destroy the biological. Laboratory Sergeant No Himin calibrated the electronic warfare suite that would blind the station's internal sensors. During their initial approach, the others prepared in silence, each operative handling their equipment with the practiced ease of professionals who had done this hundreds of times before. None of them spoke about the probability of survival. None of them needed to. The station emerged from the nebula like a wound in space, a massive structure of black metal and pulsing energy that radiated menace even at this distance. Quan had seen military installations across human space and beyond, but nothing quite like this. The Silence Compact had built their fortress to inspire fear. Every angle and surface designed to communicate that those who entered uninvited would never leave. Docking approach in 3 minutes, Shin reported from the pilot station. They have not detected our deception yet. They will soon, Quan replied. Once we are inside, the priority is the bioweapon laboratories. Everything else is secondary. The vessel slid into a docking bay, reserved for compact hunter ships. And for a few precious seconds, the station security systems accepted them as returning operatives. Then the airlock opened and the killing began. Quan moved first, his weapon up and firing before the reception team could process that something was wrong. 2 compact operatives dropped with holes in their foreheads, their hands still reaching for weapons that would never clear their holsters. Shin and Deho flanked him, covering angles and eliminating threats with the synchronized precision that only came from years of training together. The team pushed deeper into the station, following the route that intelligence had provided through maintenance corridors and service tunnels designed for workers rather than warriors. They encountered their first serious resistance at a junction point where 6 compact hunters had established a defensive position. The enemy operatives were good, among the best the galaxy had produced. But they made the same mistake that so many others had made when facing humans. They expected their opponents to fight rationally, to calculate costs and risks, to retreat when the tactical situation became unfavorable. Instead, Sergeant Park Ji-him charged directly into their firing line, absorbing 3 hits that should have killed him, and continued forward until he was close enough to use his blade. The distraction cost him his life, but opened a gap that the rest of the team exploited with brutal efficiency. 6 compact hunters died in the next 4 seconds, and Park died knowing that his sacrifice had bought his teammates passage to the next level. Move, Quan ordered, his voice tight with the grief he could not afford to feel. We honor him by completing the mission. The team pressed on, leaving Park's body where it fell because there was no time for anything else. They found the bioweapon laboratories, 3 levels below the station's command center, a complex of sealed chambers where engineered Plagues waited in containment fields for the signal it would send them toward human. World Sergeant No Himmons stared at the readouts and felt her blood run cold. "These are not just toxins," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They designed these to spread through human populations like wildfire, mutating to overcome any immunity we might develop." "Can they be destroyed?" Quan asked. "Yes, but the containment fields are integrated with the station's power grid," Himmon replied. "Destroying them safely would require shutting down the entire facility. And if we destroy them without shutting down the grid, the resulting explosion would vaporize everything within 200 meters, including whoever triggers the detonation." The team absorbed this information in silence. "I will do it," Himmon said before anyone else could volunteer. "The rest of you need to reach the command center and broadcast the evidence we have gathered." "Himmon," Deho started, but she cut him off with a look that carried the weight of her decision. "This is why we exist," she said simply. "To do what must be done so that others can live." Quan wanted to argue, wanted to find another way, but he had commanded special operations long enough to recognize a necessary sacrifice when he saw one. "Make it count," he said, the words carrying everything he could not say. Alao Jinan nodded and turned back to this laboratory controls while the rest of the team continued. Toward the command center, they encountered heavier resistance as they climbed. Compact hunters responding to alarms that finally revealed the scope of the infiltration. Another Spectre operative fell holding its corridor so his teammates could reach a critical stairwell. Another died when a plasma bolt caught her in the chest as she provided covering fire for the final assault on the command center. 6 humans breached the doors of the Silence Compact's nerve center, finding a chamber filled with holographic displays and communication systems that connected to every corner of the galaxy. And standing in the center of it all, his pale Kethvori features illuminated by the glow of active screens, was Ambassador Morval. "Impressive," Morval said, showing no fear despite the weapons pointed at him. "I did not believe humans could penetrate this facility." "You underestimated us," Quan replied. "Just like everyone else." "Perhaps," Morval acknowledged. "But it does not matter because in less than 1 hour the bioweapon shipments will launch, and there is nothing you can do to stop them. The laboratories have been rigged for destruction, and the shipments have already been loaded onto automated vessels that will launch regardless of what happens to this station," Morval said, a thin smile crossing his face. "You came too late, human." Quan felt despair threaten to overwhelm him for just a moment before training and discipline reasserted control. "Shin," he ordered, "access their communication systems and broadcast everything we have found to the Concord channels." "Understood," Shin replied, moving to the nearest console and beginning to work. "You think the Concord will care?" Morval asked. "They fear you almost as much as we do, and many of them secretly hoped we would succeed." "Maybe," Quan admitted, "but they will not be able to ignore evidence broadcast across every public channel in the galaxy." The transmission began, carrying detailed proof of the conspiracy to every species in the Galactic Concord, images of the bioweapon laboratories, recordings of compact communications, financial records linking prominent Kethvori officials to the assassination campaign against humanity, everything the galaxy needed to understand what had been done in their name. "You have accomplished nothing," Morval insisted, though uncertainty had crept into his voice. "The weapons will still launch and humanity will still fall." As if in answer, the station shuddered as a massive explosion tore through the lower-level sergeant. No Himmon had completed her mission. "The bioweapon stores are destroyed," Shin reported, reading the damage assessments that flooded across the screens. "And the explosion took out the launch bay where the automated vessels were docked." Morval stared at the readouts. his composure finally cracking as he understood that 3,000 years of compact operations had been undone by 8 humans who refused to accept extinction. "You have made powerful enemies today," he said, his voice shaking with rage and fear. "This is not over." "No," Quan agreed, securing the ambassador with restraints while his team worked to extract every piece of evidence the station systems contained. "It is not over." The station continued to burn around them as they made their way back to the docking bay, carrying proof of the conspiracy and a prisoner who could testify to its scope behind them. The Silence Compact's fortress began to die. Taking its secrets and its horrors into the void, 6 humans emerged from the flames. 6 survivors of a mission that should have been impossible. They had won. But the cost would haunt them forever, and the hardest part was still to come. Nexus Tertius smelled like desperation and opportunity. A sprawling station built in the gravitational shadow of a dying star where the laws of civilized space held no power and everything had a price. Lieutenant Shin Yuna moved through the crowded market district with the casual alertness of someone who belonged in places like this, her eyes scanning faces and hands and weapons while her body language projected nothing more threatening than a trader looking for bargains. Beside her, Sergeant Odeho played the role of hired muscle, his massive frame drawing attention away from Yuna's smaller figure and the questions she was asking in whispered conversations. At every third stall, they were hunting the poison that had nearly killed Admiral Chai, tracing its chemical signature back through black market distribution channels to find whoever had commissioned its creation. The trail had led them here, to a Kethvari bioweapons dealer named Vethkai, who operated from a converted cargo bay in the station's lower levels. "Contact ahead," Deho murmured, his lips barely moving as he pretended to examine a display of counterfeit Concord currency. 2 Salaith watching the corridor intersection, trying very hard to look like they are not watching anything. Yuna noted their positions and adjusted her route accordingly, taking a side passage that would bring them to Vethkai's location from an unexpected angle. Major Quan had deployed Spectre teams across 3 systems, each pair following different threads of the conspiracy that was killing Earth's military leadership. Yuna and Deho had drawn the assignment that required the most delicate touch, infiltrating criminal networks to gather intelligence without alerting whoever was coordinating the attacks. So far, they had confirmed that the operation against humanity was professional and well-funded, using resources that suggested a major power rather than a rogue faction. The bioweapons dealer's hideout occupied a space that had once been a legitimate medical supply warehouse before Nexus Tertius abandoned any pretense of legitimacy. Approached the entrance alone while Deho positioned himself to cover her extraction if things went wrong. Vethkai received her in a chamber filled with bubbling vats and holographic molecular diagrams, the Kethvori's long pale fingers dancing across a control surface as biological compounds swirled in containment fields around them. "You seek custom work," Vethkai said without looking up. "Something designed for specific biology, perhaps. I seek information about custom work already completed," Yuna replied, placing a credit chip on the table between them. "A toxin designed to target human nervous systems, delivered approximately 20 standard days ago through channels that lead back to this facility." Vethkai's fingers paused for just a moment before resuming their dance across the controls. "Such information would be expensive. Name your price." "The price would be my life," Vethkai said, finally meeting her eyes. "Because the beings who commissioned that work do not tolerate loose ends, and you are clearly not simply a curious trader." Yuna let the mask of the casual buyer fall away, revealing the cold professional beneath. "You are correct," she said. "I am not a trader, and I am not here to negotiate." Her hand moved faster than Kethvari eyes could track. And suddenly, Vethkai found a blade, pressed against the major artery running along the left side of their throat. The toxin killed good people, Yuna continued, her voice flat and emotionless. And you helped create it, so now you will tell me everything. Or I will demonstrate how quickly human reflexes can open Kethvari blood vessels. Vethkai talked. The bioweapons dealer revealed that the contract had come through the Silence Compact, an organization that most believed was merely legend, and that the toxin was only the beginning of a larger program. They commissioned 12 different biological agents. Vethkai gasped, the blades still pressing against sensitive tissue, each one designed to exploit specific weaknesses in human physiology and distributed across multiple delivery systems. What delivery systems? Atmospheric dispersal units hidden in population centers on human colony worlds, set to activate simultaneously on a signal from Compact Command. Yuna felt ice spread through her veins as she processed the implications. This was not an assassination campaign. This was preparation for genocide. Where is Compact Command? She demanded, pressing the blade harder. A station in the Shroud Nebula, hidden in Kethvari sovereign space, Vethkai whimpered. Coordinates are encrypted in my personal files, please. I have told you everything. Yuna retrieved the files and then made a decision that would haunt her for years. She could not leave Vethkai alive to warn the Compact that their plan had been discovered. But she also could not bring herself to execute an unarmed prisoner who had cooperated. She settled for a neural disruptor that would leave the dealer unconscious for several hours. Enough time for Spectre to extract and relay the intelligence to Major Quan Chi and Deho were halfway to their extraction point when the ambush hit. The Seleth Watchers had been scouts for a larger force, Compact hunters who had been monitoring Vethkai's facility. Against exactly this kind of infiltration, 6 of them emerged from concealed positions, moving with the fluid coordination of professional killers. And Yuna understood immediately that these were not ordinary criminals. These were the elite operatives of an organization that had conducted assassinations across the galaxy for 3,000 years. Contact, she snapped, drawing her sidearm as Deho pulled the heavy rifle from beneath his coat. 6 hostiles, Compact hunters. The firefight that followed lasted less than 2 minutes, but felt like Horse. Yuna and Deho fought with the desperate efficiency of soldiers who knew that failure meant not just their own deaths, but the deaths of billions of their people. And they discovered something that the Compact hunters had not anticipated. Humans did not fight like other species. They did not calculate odds or conserve energy or retreat when the situation turned against them. They attacked with relentless aggression, absorbing hits that would have dropped other beings and continuing to fire even as blood ran from wounds that should have been incapacitating. 4 Compact hunters died in that corridor, killed by prey that refused to acknowledge the natural order of predator and victim. The remaining 2 fled, carrying word back to their masters that something unexpected had happened on the bridge of his freighter. Major Quan received Yuna's transmission and immediately understood the strategic situation. They know we are coming now, he said to the assembled Spectre operatives, which means we have lost the element of surprise. We still have the coordinates, Lieutenant Shin pointed out, her arm wrapped in battlefield dressings from the wounds she had taken during the extraction. And we know their plan. We also know that we cannot wait for reinforcements or official sanction, Quan added, because by the time the Concord decides whether to act, those bioweapons will have been deployed. He looked around the cramped bridge at the faces of his team. 12 operatives who had answered the activation call, knowing that they might never return. They had already lost 2 in the past week, killed holding defensive positions so their teammates could escape with critical intelligence. 10 remained. 10 humans against an organization that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia. "We go in alone," Quan said. "No backup, no extraction plan, just a mission." No one argued, no one suggested alternatives. They were Task Force Spectre, the hunters humanity had created to face threats that conventional forces could not handle. And this was the moment they had been built forth. Freighter altered course toward the Shroud Nebula, carrying 10 soldiers toward a battle that would determine whether humanity survived or fell to engineered extinction behind them. The compact hunters regrouped and sent warning to their hidden fortress. The prey was coming, but for the first time in 3,000 years. The Silence Compact was not entirely certain who was hunting whom. Ambassador Yun Seoha stood at the center of the observation deck and watched the stars spin slowly beyond the transparent walls of Convergence Prime, the largest diplomatic station in the known galaxy. And she wondered if today would be the day humanity finally earned its place among the stars, or the day they made enemies of everyone watching. 3 years of provisional membership in the Galactic Concord had brought humanity to this moment, a final evaluation that would determine whether Earth and its colonies would be accepted as full members of the interstellar community or cast back into isolation at the edge of civilized space. The observation deck filled with representatives from 12 elder species, beings who had traveled between stars when humans still lived in caves, and they had come to witness what the Concord Council called a demonstration of capability. Yun understood what it really was. It was a test, a chance for the galaxy to measure the threat level of the newest species to reach the stars. And she had argued against it for months before accepting that refusal would only confirm the fears that already spread through alien corridors. Whenever humans walked past behind her, General Park Ji-hoon gave the signal, and the demonstration began. 30 human Marines entered the combat simulation chamber below the observation deck, their movements visible through the transparent floor, and the alien representatives leaned forward with expressions that ranged from clinical interest to barely hidden fear. The simulation activated, filling the chamber with holographic enemies and obstacles, designed to test speed and strength and endurance and tactical thinking. And the Marines moved into action. Yun had seen human soldiers train before, but watching through alien eyes made her notice things she had always taken for granted. The Marines ran without tiring, their bodies built for pursuit across distances that would exhaust most species in minutes. They shrugged off impacts that should have broken bones, adapted to shifting conditions faster than the simulation could generate new challenges, and coordinated their movements through nothing more than glances and hand signals, as if they shared a single minda. Vethrani analyst beside Yun made a sound of disbelief when one Marine took a hit that sent him spinning to the ground, only to rise 3 seconds later and continue fighting as if nothing had happened. "How is that possible?" the analyst whispered, her 4 eyes blinking rapidly as she studied the readouts on her personal scanner. "That impact would have killed a Vethrani soldier instantly, and your human simply stands up and continues. We heal fast," Yun replied, keeping her voice neutral even as pride swelled in her chest. "Our bodies are designed for damage and recovery, because our homeworld taught us that survival requires both." The demonstration continued for 2 hours, and by the end the observation deck had fallen into uncomfortable silence. Yun watched the reactions of the various delegations and saw what she had feared. The Morvani clustered together, their insect-like bodies clicking with agitation as they processed what they had witnessed. Salaith coiled their serpentine forms tighter, their scales shifting colors and patterns that indicated deep distress. The Vethrani analyst continued scanning long after the demonstration ended, as if hoping her instruments would reveal some trick or deception that could explain what she had seen only. The Kefvari delegation remained still, their pale, elongated faces betraying nothing as Ambassador Morval observed the human Marines filing out of the simulation, Chamberlain had dealt with Morval before and had learned. Distrust the calm that the HFY ambassador wore like a mask. But she could not read anything in those silver eyes as they tracked the departing soldiers. General Park approached the observation deck, his uniform still crisp despite the hours he had spent coordinating the demonstration, and he nodded respectfully to the assembled representatives. The Galactic Concord requested proof of human military capability, Park said, his voice carrying across the silent chamber. And we have provided it with complete transparency because humanity seeks only peaceful cooperation with our galactic neighbors. Peaceful, a Salaith representative hissed, the word dripping with disbelief. You show us warriors who cannot be stopped and speak of peace. We show you what we are, Yoon interjected, stepping forward to stand beside Park, because hiding our nature would be a form of deception, and we wish to begin our full membership with honesty between our peoples. The vote came 3 hours later, conducted in the formal chambers of the Concord Council, and Yoon held her breath as each species registered their decision. The result was closer than she had hoped. 7 species voted to accept humanity as full members. 5 voted against, and the motion passed by the narrowest possible margin. Celebration erupted among the human delegation as the announcement echoed through Convergence Prime. And Yoon smiled and accepted congratulations from allies who had supported Earth's membership application from the beginning. But beneath the joy, she felt something cold settle in her stomach, a warning that she could not quite name. She watched Ambassador Morval leave the council chamber without a word, those silver eyes meeting hers for just a moment before the HFY disappeared through a side corridor. And in that brief contact, she saw something that made her smile falter. It was not anger or fear or disappointment, it was calculation. The cold assessment of someone measuring a problem and considering solutions. General Park appeared at her elbow, his own smile fading as he noticed her expression. Ambassador, he said quietly, is something wrong? I do not know, Yoon admitted, but I think we may have made more enemies today than friends. Park glanced around the celebration, noting the forced smiles on several alien faces and the whispered conversations happening in corners, away from human ears. They fear us, he said, understanding dawning in his voice. We thought we were proving ourselves worthy of membership, but instead we proved that we are dangerous. Yes, Yoon agreed. And I wonder what frightened people do when they cannot run away from the thing that scares them. That night, after the celebration ended and the human delegation retired to their quarters, Ambassador Morval stood alone in a private communication chamber and activated a secure channel that had existed for 3,000 years. The being that answered the call had no name, only a title that translated roughly as the voice. And it spoke for an organization that most galactic citizens believed was only legend. The Silence Compact acknowledges your contact, the voice said, its features hidden behind layers of encryption. State your purpose. Morval considered the words carefully before speaking, knowing that once spoken they could not be taken back. Humanity has joined the Concord, the ambassador said finally, and they are more dangerous than anyone anticipated. We observed the demonstration, the voice replied. Your assessment is accurate. They will grow stronger with time, Morval continued. Their population expands rapidly, and their military capability will only increase as they integrate Concord technology with their natural advantages. You wish to propose a contract? Yes, Morval said, the word carrying the weight of genocide. Systematic elimination of human military leadership, followed by targeted biological intervention against population centers. Silence stretched across the connection before the voice responded. The compact accepts your contract, it said. Payment terms will be delivered through standard channels and operations will begin within 30 standard cycles. The channel closed, leaving Morval alone in the darkness with the knowledge of what had been set in motion in her quarters. Ambassador Yoon stared at the stars beyond her window and tried to shake the feeling that something terrible was coming. Something that would test humanity in ways the simulation chamber never could. She did not sleep that night somewhere in the vast darkness between stars. Ancient systems activated for the first time in decades, and beings who had perfected the art of death began preparing for their newest assignment. The galaxy had trembled at humanity's strength. Now the elite killers would strike.